Hello there. I've been asked to do a video on the M1 Garand. And it's gonna end up being a long video. It's gonna be a lot of segments. I tried to condense it down into something short, but it just doesn't work. You can't get anywhere. So we're gonna do a lot of parts, and I decided to name this old rifle. And it's the story of one of my M1 Garands that I picked it up at a gun show. And you know, I go to the gun show, wander around, and see what's there. There's a lot of, you can make some nice deals if you know what you're looking for. And this particular day, I was looking for something else, and I stumbled across this guy who had 3 M1s. He was walking around with them, trying to sell them. Kind of overpriced. But I finally stopped him, and I said, "Hey, let me take a look at those." So I looked at 2 of them, and they were pretty dolled up and pretty, and new wood, and they didn't really interest me. They didn't gauge out that well. And the third one he had looked pretty nice. Unfortunately, they put a new piece of wood on it. I would have preferred to have the old piece of wood. But there again, I was looking for a shooter. I've got enough collectibles, and I like to shoot them. So I was looking for something I could shoot, and maybe this will work for me. So I took a look at it. Well, here it is. This is that rifle. It's clear as everybody can see. Unfortunately, he had to put new wood on it. It's a nice piece of wood, and unfortunately he stained it with walnut. I'm not sure what I'm going to do about that yet. There's a little surplus wood on here, and maybe I can sand it back and fit it a little better. It doesn't fit too well around the trigger guard. And of course he didn't bother to fit the wood at all. He pretty much just, literally must have pounded this receiver into this stock. Because I had a heck of a time getting it out. In fact, I was afraid I was going to break the stock trying to get the iron out of it. But I ultimately did, and I relieved it so it would fit. But here's what I found at the gun show. It looked pretty nice, and he claimed it was all original. So the first thing I did was take a look at the barrel, and I noticed right away it had been re-barreled. It had a May of 1955 Springfield barrel in it. So it's obviously not original. The armory had been working on it, or I assume the armory. I had my gauges with me, and I checked the barrel for erosion, and it was great. The muzzle end and the chamber end were both in really good shape. I don't think it's been fired much, if at all. They were all 0. We got to looking further at it. The sights were a little messed up. They didn't detent right. So the price kept coming down because he really wanted to sell it. Well, the next thing I noticed, unfortunately they zip tie these up so you can't play with them, but I noticed uncocked with the op rod closed, the safety would detent to safety, which it shouldn't do. So I told him, I said, "Hey, you got something wrong in this trigger group." He didn't want to take it apart there at the gun show, so one thing led to another, and I ended up buying this rifle for, it was either $450 or $500, I can't remember now, but still it was a good price. So I go home with my new rifle. I take it apart and see what's going on. Well, as far as the sights went, there was nothing really new there. It was just a matter of taking them apart. The pinion was rather worn out, so rebuilt it, put it back together. Now it works great. The trigger group, however, was a different matter. So I'm going to take a little break here for a second because we're going to have to zoom in on this. So I'm going to show you what I found in the trigger group. Okay, we're back. Sorry we had to stop here so I could get this up on the bench and get a close-up of this. Here's the trigger group. It's not out of this rifle. It's one of my spare trigger groups that I have. But it is a Springfield Armory, and hopefully this will show you the components as they are assembled in the trigger group. This is the hammer. Here's the safety. Here's the part of the safety that your finger would manipulate the trigger. The half of the sear, the hammer catches. And the problem that I found was, first of all, when I pulled it apart, this safety, the tab was broken, and that's not unusual. This happens a lot on M1s and M1As. So anybody out there with an M1A, if you run into this, this is just it's a common breakage. It's not a problem. You just replace the part. They're available anywhere. However, try and get mil-spec parts if you can. This is what a new one looks like, and you can see what's broken right there. In fact, if you look in the manuals, they'll even show you on the early and the late models, this is where they tend to break. So that was the reason that the safety was acting funny. So in further inspection, I got to looking at the hammer and the trigger, and these two, when the hammer comes back, it locks into this catch. And then when you release the trigger, it's passed off and caught by the sear, so that when you squeeze the trigger, the hammer can go forward. Well, one thing I noticed, and this may have been why this safety was broken, also this safety was an International Harvester part instead of a Springfield Armory. So somebody's been in there before. Well, right away I noticed, I don't know if you can see this detail, but this should be a really sharp, crisp edge. A lot like this crisp edge. And it's not. And the hammer has also been worn away, but when I looked at it more and on closer inspection, I don't believe it was worn away. I think somebody tried to do a trigger job here and it didn't work out for them, and what they really created was a very dangerous rifle, because this won't hold. It won't hang on. And they ground so much material away that it didn't comfortably transfer over to the sear. It could actually miss. See, that should lock up and it won't. Really dangerous. So, no problem. I still thought I had a nice rifle. I had it all what appeared to be an original action, and it had a nice new barrel in it. Had a nice piece of wood. I would have preferred to have the old piece. I like to restore them, like another one I'll show you. So I called around, sent off, and I'll put some links down below on where to get parts. And I was able to not only get Springfield Armory parts, but I was able to get the correct dash numbers so I could return this rifle pretty much back to being original, except it's got a new Springfield barrel in it. Well, great. Now we've got a great shooter. Oh, one other problem I had was the stacking swivel. I don't know who did it, but somebody reefed down on the screw so hard they destroyed the screw trying to get it back out, and the stacking swivel was frozen, so I was able to drill that out and replace it, and now the stacking swivel works just fine. I think that's pretty much all I had to do to the rifle, and it's turned out to be a great shooter. So let's take a break for a minute, and then we'll just start talking about the rifle now that you've seen what was wrong with it. Okay, we're back. Well, I don't know how well those small parts showed up. We'll have to see how that goes. But I'm going to carry on now about the rifle. There's so much to talk about. I'm going to give it a little history in this series. We're going to talk about how to load the clips, how to load the rifle, how not to get the M1 thumb, which is that's important for a lot of people, and it's very simple to avoid it. You just have to understand how the rifle functions. And then ultimately we're going to shoot it. And then in the end we'll strip it down, field strip it, and we'll show you how to clean it so you can maintain it. I don't think we'll go any farther than that. That's enough to know. Maybe later on we could do some sort of armorer's video and show you how to disassemble the bolt and maybe do some basic repairs. So back to the story of this old rifle. That's how I acquired this rifle. The parkerizing is pretty nice. The sights came along beautifully. It timed out fine. I was really lucky with the trigger. The replacement parts, when I put the trigger and new hammer in, the engagement latches and the sear were very, very smooth. This trigger it's one of the best I've got. I'm just lucky, I guess. But it came off at about a 4.5, maybe a 5-pound pull, and it's got no creep. It's beautiful. I love shooting this rifle. And then when I took it out and shot it for the first time after I put the sights back together, I just set everything at 0, went out, and it was just dead on. I couldn't have been happier. The wood's probably my last issue. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. But in the meantime, I hate to mess with success because it shoots so well. Alright, I know we're out of time, so we'll take a break here and we'll start with part 2.